Brace yourself, folks. I'm your host, Minky K, and today on Unpatterned, we're talking about breaking the cycles of abuse. It's all around us when you turn on the radio, the TV news, or social media. Child abuse and gender-based violence is being highlighted and brought to the front like never before, which is a good thing. The time for staying silent is over. Fear is being replaced with courage, and we see shame skulking out the back door as empathy and compassion arrive. The great thing is more and more people are coming forward exposing the truth. Yes, disclosure is at hand and it ain't pretty. Those movements like Me Too started the ripple effect, growing stronger every day. People are finally standing together and saying enough, no more. The time for accountability is here. But as the silence cracks, the question lingers, how do we actually break a cycle of abuse that has been running for generations? So let's get comfy and take a deeper dive to get a better perspective. Abuse isn't just an event, it's a pattern, and these cycles repeat because of learned behaviors and unresolved wounds. When abuse is all you've ever known, you don't call it abuse, you call it home. And many of us don't recognize the trauma until we see healthy examples of relationships or family life. And sometimes that comparison doesn't happen until we enter our adult lives and finally realize, hold on a minute, there's something wrong. Let's just think about our nervous system for a second. If you grew up surrounded by instability, fear, or violence, your body learned to live in survival mode. And that means intense emotional reactions can become a norm, especially when triggered, leaving you perplexed as to where the heck did this come from and what is wrong with me. When those reactions are never understood or healed, they shape how we relate to others, how we form attachments, and even how we handle stress throughout our lives. So the next time you feel yourself going into overdrive and reacting, I want you to pause and ask yourself, where is this coming from? What is being triggered here? What is this showing me? Very often, these reactions we're having in this present moment isn't only about what's happening now. It's touching something much older, an old wound or an old fear, a time where we felt unsafe or unseen. And when we ask with curiosity instead of judgment, we're creating a space, and in that space, awareness grows. So let's take a look at our ancestral rug and the compromised system we grew up in. How often have you caught yourself saying, I never want to be like my parents? Only to catch yourself doing the same thing or sounding just like them, right? But then I often wonder how many times our parents actually said those exact same words. Let's take a further look back in time. The systems we grew up in were built on separation and power, and we were taught that power over someone equals strength. And that kept us in a loop, protecting the family image rather than the people inside it. I'm sure we can all agree that our ancestors did a sterling job of sweeping things under the rug just before the guests arrived, or burying the truth in a dark closet along with Uncle George. But these family dynamics didn't exist in a vacuum. Society shaped the rules long before we learned them at home. We were taught rigid ideas about strength and weakness. Men are strong, women are weak, boys don't cry, and girls definitely did not matter. They further reinforced these patterns through constant messages of separation and competition. Male versus female, black versus white, religion versus religion, and country versus country. It became kind of like survival of the fittest, where the motto was simply suck it up and carry on. So when you step back for a second and you start to see how deeply these patterns of fear, power, dominance, and silence have been woven into our collective systems, and how they flowed into our very lives, shaping how we first learn about relationships, you start to see the inheritance we were given before we even had a voice. In family constellation work, it becomes clear how these patterns are passed down from one generation to the next, perpetuating those cycles of abuse. And sometimes the abused child grows up and becomes the perpetrator, not because they're inherently bad, but because that behavior was learned. We all mirror what we see. And kids are like sponges, absorbing the emotional environment long before they can make sense of it. How a father treats a mother, how parents speak to each other, how conflict is handled, how emotions are expressed or suppressed. They all become a blueprint for our relationships. And when boundaries are crossed and abuse goes unseen, ignored, or denied, and there's no accountability, the perpetrator learns that they can get away with it. and manipulation and fear keep the victims in silence. And society can unintentionally reinforce that silence because most of us don't want to feel like outsiders. We want to fit in, we want to belong. And there's often tremendous judgment attached to abuse, especially towards women who speak about it. Instead of support, we may face blame, doubt, or discomfort. And people often look away, they change the subject, or they question the story rather than holding the space for the truth. And so the silence continues, not because people don't want to know something is wrong, but because speaking about it feels too risky. And there's something to think about. If harmful behavior can go unchecked inside the home, what stops it from continuing outside? Which leads me to a more important question. What are we teaching our kids and the future generations? So let's look at how awkward we are as a society when it comes to abuse. And I want to share a story from a friend that perfectly captures this awkwardness. She walked into a hospital after a cycling accident and her face was badly bruised and bleeding, and the room went dead silent. You could actually feel the tension and everybody assumed the worst. And women quietly giving each other that knowing look. Because let's be honest, women are always looking over their shoulder. It's a default setting. She finally said, "Don't worry, it's just a bike accident." The relief was palpable. But why are we so afraid to ask? Why do we look away? Is this what we expect from society? This kind of violence? Instead of feeling awkward, perhaps we should approach these moments with compassion first instead of judgment and create that safe space for people. Now let's talk about those of you who feel the actual weight of abuse. Breaking the cycle is not a quick fix. It's a deep, often painful observation of the generational trauma passed down from one generation to the next. Many of you listening are the actual cycle breakers, and you're the ones that have decided that the abuse stops with you. And this is a massive sacred burden to carry. It means that you are the one looking at the patterns that your parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents were too afraid to face. And you are the one saying the buck stops here. And what you need is awareness, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. To heal the lineage, we map out the family dynamics to see a bigger picture by exploring the history and the dynamics. And those patterns that were once hidden become visible. And when you see that pattern, something powerful happens. We shift. We begin to realize it wasn't our fault and we didn't cause the abuse. We were born into it. And the first step in breaking any cycle is the acknowledgement. We cannot heal what we continue to deny, and for many of us, this is the hardest step. People often use coping strategies to survive, ignoring or downplaying what happened, or thinking about it rather than fully feeling it because those emotions were too overwhelming at the time. And abuse within families is heartbreaking because the lines between love and loyalty can become twisted, and speaking the truth will feel like betrayal. But you are not the one doing the betraying. The betrayal already happened, and it happened to you. So acknowledging the truth isn't betrayal. It's simply refusing to carry the silence of abuse that was never yours to hold. And validation becomes crucial here because many are told that their experiences are not that bad or it happens to everyone. And responses like that deepen feelings of our isolation and shame. So validating your own experiences allows you to say, yes, that happened. Yes, it hurt. And yes, it mattered. Because something was taken, your sense of safety, trust, innocence, voice, or belief that the world was a safe place. And acknowledging that loss doesn't mean staying stuck. It honors the truth. We can then begin to reclaim what we lost, and we can take back our power. We begin to see the patterns that have been playing out in our lives, in our relationships, at work, at home, and we see where we felt victimized. And this is not about blame, it's about awareness. Once we see the pattern, we begin to change it. In order to do so, we need to now go and meet the inner child, and this is where self-compassion is essential. Because we're wading through the judgment, the guilt, the shame, and the parts of ourselves that we've rejected and shoved into the shadows, those coping strategies that were created by a child, simply trying to survive. Imagine now that inner child, that 5-year-old or that 10-year-old. Would you blame them? Would you shame them? Get angry at them? Of course not. Yet you spent years being angry at yourself for those very coping mechanisms. The way you shut down, or the way you lash out in anger, or when you get too emotional. But those were the very tools that kept you alive. And she didn't have the emotional intelligence or the brain development to process what was happening. They didn't know any better because they weren't taught any better. They thought this was what love looked like. This is why compassion is so important. When we begin to embrace those parts of ourselves we rejected, to hold them and love them, the pain can start dissolving. And she doesn't need to carry it anymore. So placing a hand on your heart, you need to call your inner child to you and tell her that you see her pain, that she doesn't need to carry it anymore, that she has been so strong and helped you survive. But you've got this now, and it's time to let go and reclaim what she lost, her innocence, her magic, her power. Tell her it's safe because you've got her. This is why forgiveness is so important, because it starts with forgiving ourselves and about releasing that version of ourselves that was shaped by this trauma, and recognizing that we are not responsible for the environments we're born into, and that we don't need to continue punishing ourselves for what happened. And something shifts when we forgive. We begin to release that old version of ourselves, shaped by that, and slowly we start reclaiming who we truly are. That old story, it doesn't have to define you. It is a chapter, but it's not the whole book, and you can start taking responsibility for yourself today. So looking at the bigger picture can bring that compassion for those who came before us, not to excuse that harmful behavior, but to understand it, that they too were trapped in cycles that they didn't know how to break and that they didn't have tools for. This kind of healing doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience, gentleness, and a lot of courage. And there will be moments when shame or anger try to pull you back into the old patterns. But each time, remember to choose awareness, because every choice reshapes your story and breaks the cycle of abuse. And when you do that, you're not only healing yourself, you're healing the generational trauma that has quietly shaped our family for decades or even centuries. And we're changing the future, the way we raise our children, what they believe about love, safety, and relationships. We're showing them something different, healthier, and more conscious. In many ways, we're shifting the collective consciousness, and every person who chooses awareness over silence, compassion over shame, and healing over denial adds something new to the world. So if you're walking this path right now, remember this: you are not alone, you belong, and you deserve to be loved. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really appreciate your time, as I do know this was quite a heavy and long one. And if you'd like to dive deeper into this topic of breaking cycles of abuse, please feel free to visit my website. I'll put a link below. I'll also be posting a more in-depth article on this topic in the blog section. Please take time to like and subscribe so we can grow this channel together and continue to get unpatterned. So till next time, take care and remember to be kind.